Today's the 16th day of Advent, and our story is Elijah. We've been following the royal line of Israel for a while, but there's also a prophetic line that runs through Israel, a line of prophets who come to speak truth to power on behalf of God. And Elijah is one of those great prophets who comes after the time of Solomon. And he has a couple of big stories, one of which is pictured here, where God sends fire to the altar in a showdown with Baal, where Elijah calls on God to light the altar, and God acts and moves and proves that God is the God, whereas the false gods are unable to do anything. But the story I want to talk about today is actually a different one, where Elijah goes up on a mountain to speak with God. God says that God has a message for Elijah, and so Elijah's waiting on the mountain, and while he's waiting, there's a great wind that comes and rattles the earth and breaks rocks, but God was not in the wind. Then there's an earthquake that shakes the mountain, but God was not in the earthquake. And then there's a great fire that sweeps across the mountain, but God was not in the fire. And then there's the sound of sheer silence. And that's how Elijah knows God is speaking, and goes out on the mountain and says, "Here I am, Lord." I think often we wish that God would speak to us, and sometimes we hear God speaking to us in the big moments of our life. Something huge happens and we say, God must be trying to tell me something, and maybe God is, but sometimes an earthquake is just an earthquake. A fire is just a fire. Sometimes we struggle to hear God because our lives are so loud. We can't hear the sheer silence that God comes to speak to us in because we're so focused on the windstorms and the earthquakes and the fires. We live busy, cluttered, loud lives, and it can be hard to be still and know that God is God, and to listen for God in silence. The season of Advent is supposed to be one where we slow down and pay attention, yet how busy are our lives? How busy are our calendars right now? There's so much going on, it can be hard to slow down and to look for God in the silence. And yet we know that God doesn't just work through gigantic movements. God is a God of presence. That's what Christmas is all about. God is with us. And God speaks to us even in the silence of our lives. So maybe today, find some time to just be still, to listen for God in the sheer silence, and to know that God is with you. Remember that you are loved, and God's peace be with you.